It is 11:01, and this is the CPP Liaison Study Break group. Thank you for joining us. And if you are indeed a candidate, please do us a favor and either in the chat or in your identity, if you click on the participants link at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can add to your name, rename yourself, and you can do like Don Davidson, who said that he passed the exam, or you can put in there where you're from. But if you're a candidate, let us know if you are a candidate. Those of us who are liaisons will be doing something similar and letting you know that they are liaisons as soon as possible. As we go through today's call, we'll keep it to 1 hour as best we can. Chris Jones will be monitoring the chat for questions. There was Chris. Raise your hand again for him, Chris. Chris Jones will be monitoring the chat for questions. And then Chuck, are you in there, Chuck, somewhere? Yeah, there you are. Chuck will be looking for resources as needed. So if there's something that comes up and we need to cite a specific resource, that's Chuck's role. As you've joined the call, be sure to please mute your mic when you are not speaking. That doesn't mean you can't speak during the call, but do like Lawrence and Mia and some of the others have already done for us. Mute your mic when you're not speaking, and be sure to help control the pet population and have your pets spayed or neutered. Now, without further ado, and unless there's any other questions, I don't see, you can always raise your hand if nothing else, if you have your video turned on. Without further ado, unless there are any other questions, though, I was going to introduce today's special guest, who's joining us from beautiful Lubbock, Texas, and that is Chris and Deanna Duncan. A little intro here, Chris. You might want to see what kind of shade you can change here as I read these accolades, okay? Chris and Deanna Duncan operate CJ Duncan Photography in Lubbock, Texas, and in over a dozen years, they have been published in numerous national magazines and acquired many industry accolades, including the Grand Imaging Award. They have had the honor of photographing everything from weddings to families to corporate clients, including President George H.W. Bush, President George W. Bush, Vice President Dick Cheney, Stephen Covey, William Blanchard, General Schwarzkopf, Tim Tebow, Jay Leno, and Drew Brees. Chris and Deanna are both instructors at Texas School of Professional Photography and contributors to PPA EDU, while Chris is the founder of Find Your Focus Photographic Education and author of Get Certified, a CPP comprehensive course to guide you through the CPP exam and to help you achieve the Certified Professional Photographer distinction. However, what means most to both of them is their daughter, Elizabeth, a junior at Texas A&M, family, and the life they lead. Please welcome the 2021 TPPA President, Chris Duncan.
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Guy. I've forgotten I'd done some of that stuff. So when Guy invited me to do this, he said it was, a group of liaisons, kind of this little study group, and just want to know if I wanted to pop in and answer any questions and help. So I don't know the formality of this, Guy. I don't really necessarily need to do a presentation, I don't think. I'm happy to just open the floor to questions. Is that kind of what we need to do here for candidates?
You may want to ask the candidates what questions they may have for you right up front. Those of you who are candidates, feel free to either put them in the chat if you don't want to ask them verbally, or if you want to go ahead and just raise your hand and we can recognize you as quickly as possible. But Chris does have his own content that he would be willing to share with you if you're looking for an alternative way of learning the CPP exam like the back of your hand. Chris has his own guide that's really, really neat. So from the floor, Chris, if you don't mind, let's see what questions any of the candidates themselves may have for you, either in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and fire away.
Yeah. I'm happy to clarify any confusing things there may be.
And Don, you passed the exam. You can also ask questions about image submission too, sir.
Jeannie has a question. Her hand is raised.
Is this how I raise it, or is there a little hand on the screen?
Hey, that worked. I was able to see it. That works.
Okay, so I have a question. Like when we do the shutter speed and the aperture and f-stop ISO chart, that we make on this piece of paper that we're given, how high up are the questions going to be on shutter speed and how low on ISO? And I mean, how big of a range should we, write down on that?
Oh, I don't know about all of the variables. As a certified instructor, I am not privy to the exam. There'd be a conflict of interest of me trying, because I don't want an instructor teaching the exam. It's teaching the content that may be on the exam. I can share my screen. Yes. Yeah, there we go. So I'll just share this. This is out of my study guide. This is the one I encourage my students to use. It may look like something that you've seen before.
Okay.
I know that f-stops will most likely be 2.8 to f16. I think it's good to know beyond that, to know how they change and at what rate they change.
Okay.
Shutter speeds are probably 1/30th to 1,000th, I'm assuming, somewhere in there. But again, it's still good to know. And so this is the chart I give my students. You're welcome to take a screenshot of this if it helps you study for that. And the way this one is set up, it may be different than what you've seen someone else do. It may be the same, I don't know. But these are all set up to what adds more light to the scene and what removes light from the scene. So as you move to the right, each step would add light. So our ISO is more sensitive, our shutter speed gets slower, and our aperture opening gets larger. As we move to the left, everything removes light from the scene. Less sensitive ISO, faster shutter speed, or smaller aperture opening. And so when you get to an equivalency equation, you get that starting information, and then you count. So let's say it says you start at ISO 200, and one of the equivalencies mentions ISO 800. Well, you now know that lets in more light because it moves to the right. How many spaces does it move to the right? It moves 2. So that's a 2-stop increase in ISO. And so by using this chart, by going plus whatever and minus, at the end of your equation, if it equals 0, it's an equivalent.
Right. Yeah. I actually took your class.
Okay.
So I have access to it, but when I do it on my own without looking, I'm just wondering how far up I need to go, and how low I need to go. So
Did you take the online version, Jeannie, or the in-person?
I
Remind me.
took
I've
it
seen a lot of people.
during the Imaging USA. I took it.
In
I
Nashville?
missed the first day. It was the 3-day online
this year.
class. This year.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've had a lot of students, and I missed a lot of people online because it was, so I apologize for not recognizing.
I
your
actually
name.
missed the first day because I got my dates mixed up. So,
Oh,
but I've been studying the flashcards a lot online. So, and one more question. I purchased used a couple years ago when I thought I might do this, the 9th edition of this book, the London Stone Upton. And I guess they're up to, like, it was used. I don't know what it's up to now, but this has a lot of stuff about film photography. And I'm sure that's been left off of it mostly.
correct.
But now I don't know what's been added, since the 9th edition. Would anybody know that?
The 11th edition is what the current exam is using. I don't know what they've added per se. I know that all the film is removed from the exam. As far as the London book, what is new? Maybe someone else that follows that book more closely can answer that.
Okay, so that's all my questions right now.
Chris, just to add to what she said, the other day I was talking with one of the other liaisons, and they had the 12th, I had the 10th. And the content was still the same, just not necessarily on the exact same page to the greater extent. Yeah, John's holding up the 12th edition. And if you needed to, you can get different variation of that on Amazon, or go straight to the printer themselves to Pearson. And there are other options there, including one that's text only, which I asked them to clarify to say, are all the charts missing? But I have not heard back from them yet.
So I have the 12th version and edition, and one way that I bought it, and it was less expensive, I bought it loose leaf version. And what I liked about it is I could get it 3-hole punched, put it in a 3-hole binder or 3-ring binder, and I can pull out only the sections that I need to study. And then the loose leaf version seems to have wider margins in it, which means I've got plenty of room to take notes. So on a textbook, I love taking notes. The other thing, when we're talking about equivalent exposures, and I think it's important to note that the test only covers full stops. So I know it's important for everyone to kind of, for practicality purposes, to know their third stops or half stops, but the test only uses half stops on your equivalent exposures.
You meant to say full stops.
That's, oh, is that not what I said? No,
You
that
said
is
half.
correct. You are correct,
Full
guy.
stops. Yes. And I'll give you a hint for you people that have not taken the test. That's a good point, Chris. The test does work in full stops, and this chart is the full stops of those different variables. But if you ever see a half stop, most likely it's a 3-to-1 ratio. So that's a good little test taking tip, that when you see the half stop pop in there, most likely they're talking about 3-to-1. So.
Okay. Other questions from the floor? Thank you, Jeannie.
Looks like a few more people have popped in. So that's great. So if you missed, I'm Chris Duncan. I'm a CPP instructor. I teach this 3-day course at Imaging. I have an online self-paced course as well. And Guy invited me to just kind of answer some questions or clarify any things you might have when studying for the exam. So the floor is open. If you have a question, I'd love to help any way I can.
And Deb, just to clarify, you may remember in the resources that we covered recently, we talked about how you want to use PPA resources whenever possible, right? To avoid bunny trails and driving yourself nuts with inaccurate information. If you look online, you will see study guides from Kozak, from a gentleman who died, I don't know, a few years ago, but also from Chris Duncan. But his is a very unique variation of study guide. It's not like the others. You're seeing an example of it in that PowerPoint he's got up on the screen, but it's a mix of videos and audio and what you're seeing on the screen that's really good for that type of person who learns in a different way. Is that a fair statement, Chris?
Yes. My study, I have 2 products. One is the full course with like 23 videos. It'd be like taking the course live in person, except if you raise your hand, I won't see it. And there's some quizzes and you can follow along with the slide deck. I do have an in-person kit that's really designed if you're taking the exam in one of my live classes, but you want some physical material. And it's my slide deck and some transcription for my videos. So I wouldn't really call it a study guide per se. It's really more of a companion piece to when you take an in-person kit. Guy has it right there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you print it out on yourself, you need to go buy a ream of paper because it takes a lot of paper.
Mm-hmm. I've only gone through a portion of it, but it is a different, more unique style, and you'll see some of the same content that you might see 12 other places, but in a different way. So if you've seen it in something that was on the PPA site and you read it here, you go, oh, got it. Plus his videos are very helpful because you're seeing and he's explaining and adding to what you don't necessarily see written. So it's a good visual as well. And he is one of the approved instructors as well.
So this is the way I teach my CPP. And this is just, again, my personal spin on it. Obviously, I want every one of my students to be able to pass the exam and mark that goal off their list, because that's a very important goal to have in your career. And it's a personal goal, and I want you to do that. But more importantly is I want to make you a better photographer, and CPP will do that. No question, going through this process will make you a better photographer. I don't think if any liaison in here would say, I'm the same. They're all going to say I'm better after it. And so to me, CPP stands for competent, proficient, professional. And so a lot of my course and a lot of my class talks about knowing what's needed on the CPP exam, but how does that relate to your day-to-day work? How is it practically applied? And you'll be surprised how much of it is. Your teacher said, you always told your teacher, why am I studying math? I won't use this when I'm grown up. Come to find out we do. And a lot of the stuff we think on this exam, well, I'm not going to use this in day-to-day life. I'm like, actually, you do. And so,
John has his
yes,
hand up.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. I just wondered, John Gaylor here. I just wondered if you would define those words in your own words. The competent,
These three words?
proficient, professional. So what's distinct about them, and what, how would you define them?
Well, I think competent is someone that knows their craft, that knows the technical specifications of their craft. For example, I mean, I think on a base level, know how ISO is, what effect that's going to have on the image as far as cleanliness versus grain or noise, right? That's competency. You know what that means and you understand it. Proficient is able to use all that information in a way that helps you succeed and get the job done with less errors, more successes, and meeting the goals of yourself or your client. And of course, professional is operating in a moral, ethical, and legal realm that I think we're all called to do, regardless of our discipline. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess if I expanded on that more, is the CPP is tons of information. It's a lot of information. And to me, that's just the knowledge part. And information is really free. You can get it on YouTube. You can get it from a friend. You can get it on a podcast. You can get it on this call here. But what I try to teach, and I know a lot of other people do this that are in the room as well, is not just give you the information, but give you the understanding of that information. And so I use the example, I know my car needs gas and oil and fluids, but if it breaks down on the side of the road, I don't know how to fix it. So I have the knowledge, I have the information, but I don't have the understanding. And then the final step is wisdom, and that comes on the students' end of it, is how to apply that knowledge and understanding and apply it to their business. That's the practical part. That's the wisdom. And that's the hardest one to do, right? It's and that's what I'm saying, take that competency and make it proficient. So good question, John.
Thank you for the answers.
And I can't see everybody with screen sharing, guys. So
Yeah, it looks like Jeannie, do you have your hand up again? But you're on mute, Jeannie, if you want to take yourself off mute.
Okay.
There you go.
If you guys have questions, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them, or you can also type them in the chat. I am monitoring the chat, and I can ask the question for you.
Okay, there it's a hand. Okay. I guess I'll take that down. I'm not gonna take it down now. Oh, I got two of them up. All right. Learning.
They'll go off by themselves in a few
Okay,
seconds.
so well, you mentioned mathematics. Well, the inverse square law is an example of that, right? You have to know math for that. But when using, I did miss the first day of your class, but I've come across a couple commands that I don't use in Photoshop, and they were unfamiliar to me. And okay, so the variations command, is that something people use a lot? It's on the flashcards as a question.
On my flashcards?
We had a discussion about that. It was obsolete, I think. Then you can't find it anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, again, I don't know how old some of this material is I'm studying, but I never used it. I heard of it, and I'm not that versed in Photoshop, but is that going to be on the test?
I can't answer what. From an instructor standpoint, let me kind of give you the enigma we're faced with, and it kind of helps maybe explain some of this when you're asking other people or trying to get information. As an instructor, I don't see the test. I only get to know what people tell me after they took the test and say, this was a question I had. So I'm not in charge with writing the test or picking the material. That's a whole other. And it's good. I shouldn't be. I don't want to teach you the exam. I want to teach you how to be a better photographer.
Right.
So I don't know exactly what's on the test.
Well, let's
I take the same information you do,
Okay.
all those resources that PPA lists as an approved resource, because this exam, to be a certified exam, it has to have some legal standing. And there's a job, and I always want to call them a seismologist, but I know that's not it because that's the person that studies earthquakes, but it sounds similar to that. Their job is to make sure a question is written appropriately, that the answers are not, it's not misleading, and that the answers have a verifiable source to back it up. And maybe someone can Google what that job is. I think it starts with an S. But anyway, PPA has hired this person to come in and review their exam to make, so that's why those sources are so important. Those are the verified, reliable sources that their answers on their exam have been verified through. It's not because Uncle Bob said so, right? It's a published work that's been verified. That's why I can't stress enough, using those resources that PPA recommends is so valuable, because the answer will come from one of those. I don't know which one in which instance, but it will come from one of those sources. So as an instructor, I have the same information you do, reading these sources, getting input from other people that have had the exam to know what type of questions are on there, and then build a curriculum around what might be asked.
Well, can you just briefly explain the variations command?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
So
All right. Well, that's comforting because, you know, if you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to worry about it.
there's no way any of the people in this room, whether they are instructors, liaisons, whatever role they play, could know every question that could possibly be asked.
I put a link in the chat about the variations. It went away a while ago, like 2015 or something, and they moved it to be something else. So I found a discussion about it, so I just put the link to that discussion if anybody.
Okay, thanks. All right. Okay, I am muting.
If it went away in 2015, then it won't be on the current, it shouldn't be on the current exam, because it was created in 2018. Every 3 years, the exam gets reevaluated and rewritten, and they hire that seismologist or whatever they're called to come in and review it again.
Something to build on more on what you were saying about referencing the questions to the reference material. The current 50 question practice test, one of the options does have the answer. I recommend that you take the practice test without the answer, but you can go back and check your answers. And it does have the reference material that the question was pulled from attached to the question. So it'll tell you that was pulled from the London and Upton book, or that'll, so it has a way to go back and go in a deep dive into that question and why the correct answer is the correct answer.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Chris, from having your knowledge of teaching classes and having students come back to you, what do you think is the #1 area that people need to study harder on, or that they have a basic understanding that they need more work on from your years of teaching?
That's a difficult question, Sally, because each student seems to have a different strength and different weakness. I think the test specifications are so powerful because it tells you how much of the exam is coming from that content. So I was scrolling down to get to, Jeannie asked about variations. Well, that would be in digital post-production. And digital post-production, oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Digital post-production, I think, is only what, 13%? It's only 13%. It's only 13 questions will come from all of that content under there. So, I think the biggest thing I hear from students is they feel like some of the questions are subjective. And I would say yes, they probably seem subjective, but when you really read the question, there's one clear answer to that. And so I think being able to read and dissect the question and pick out those keywords is a great skill to practice on. Because sometimes you know the information, and after you see the answer, let's say it's a question you missed, and after you get the answer, like, oh, now I know it. Now it makes sense. Right. And problem is typically students move too fast reading those questions. So I tell my students, you know, if I know Sally, you've helped students do this for a long time as well. And they get so caught up in inverse square and ratios, like, oh, I'm so stressed about ratios. I'm so stressed about ratios. And it's three questions. And so much mental energy is spent on those three questions and not the other 97%. So please, if you're a candidate and you're ready to take, or you're studying for the exam, look at those test specifications. It will really help guide you on where you need to spend more time studying. You know, and I don't mean this flippantly, but if you're struggling with ratios, yes, I think you should understand them, but don't disregard the other 97% of the test to have 3% you feel confident in. Just make it 97. That's still pretty damn good. So
Mia had her hand up earlier, Chris.
Okay.
Back to that previous slide that you had there with the knowledge on there, and wisdom.
Yes.
So speaking from my point of view, and I don't know if other liaisons or CPPs feel this way, but since I am more recent to becoming a CPP, I realized pretty quickly how that information surfaces back in your mind when you pick up your camera and you're going to create an image. And that, to me, it's that exact word that you have there, and it's a transformation. And as you're going, it's like that test and those Sherman images kind of are, I always say Sherman's sitting back there in the back, because he's like, okay, here we are, you know, and you know how to, you know, you're here, and here it comes, and it gives you a platform for that one image. And then you go, oh, and then you slowly put that cloak on, you know, more and more and more. It's not, today I wasn't a CPP, and I know, and I feel all of that as well. You have it on paper, but you have to feel that. And that's, to me, it's that wisdom piece that you walk in a little more confident when you pick it up. You know, you have the understanding, but your confidence is what your client sees. You know, they don't see your understanding, and they certainly don't see your knowledge until they get a final image product, you know, unless you're stumbling all the way through the shoot, you know. But that transformation that comes on you, and I think that is the ever-growing piece as well, that once you become a CPP, to me, I equate it to a high school diploma. You have it. Now what are you going to do with it? Or a bachelor's degree. You have it. Now what are you going to do, and where is that going to take you? Because the average person may have, I think the last I read was 4 jobs in their entire lifetime. And they may not even relate to each other. They may be all separate entities over 60 years. So right. You're wearing that cloak, and you don it, and you primp it, and you hold it, and you mend it as you go, is what I would say.
Well, I think that's good to hear. That's good encouragement for those studying. And I know guys heard me say this, because Guy and I have done a lot of things together, is the best thing that you can take out of studying for the CPP, and one of my opinions, and you kind of hit on this, Mia, is it's all math and science. Everything in this, at least in the exam, is the technical breakdown of our craft. It is the math and the science. Yes, there's application you can take from that, and hopefully I can convey some of that application to you. But the great thing about math and science is it's predictable. 2 + 2 will be 4 from now until the end of time. Right? It was 4 when Noah took the animals on the ark 2 by 2, and it's still 4 today. And so inverse square is not going to be any different in 10 years than it is now. Size of source is not going to be any different in 10 years than it is from now. the way light reacts to the opening of an aperture is not going to be any different in 10 years than it is from now. And so much of this is grounded in that math that it's predictable. And when it's predictable, you can harness it. And when you can harness it, you're confident. And there's nothing you can't create when you understand those foundational elements. So we're about halfway through. I know we try to keep this to an hour. So if anyone has a question, put it in the chat or raise your hand.
I think Deb
Clarification
Davis
on
probably has a great question because she always does. Right, Deb?
Say me?
Yes.
I don't right now, guys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I am listening though. So
She always has great questions, Chris. So don't be surprised if she pops back in here in a little bit. Jessica,
Okay.
did you come up with any good ones for this morning?
I had to take a client call in between. That's why I had to jump back on. So I missed some of that. But I really think that knowing the beginning parts where I took notes on the chart where it was the exposure and the shutter at the very beginning, that was definitely the metering. I'm weak in that, and I've not done that, and that's something I definitely need to be much better on.
So you mentioned, I just want to clarify if you're trying to ask a question or make a statement. So you mentioned this chart, yes, Jessica?
Yes.
And then you said metering. So
Well,
you don't like how to meter in a practical standpoint, or the different types of metering and how they react with
both, because I don't know either one. Which is, I have not declared yet either. I am literally studying this year, so I'm trying to take in all of the content before I declare.
Okay. Well, this chart that's on the screen is really more for equivalency, figuring out your equivalency and knowing what allows more light to the image and what reduces light to the image. That's really how this chart is set up.
Okay.
When it comes to metering, there's only two types of meters that you would be asked about. One is a incident meter, which you see here, a handheld meter.
Okay.
We call it an incident meter, or also a illuminance meter. It measures how much light is illuminating the scene, illuminance, illuminating, or also say incident meter, how much light is occurring at the incident. If I hit you, there would be an incident, yes? So light is hitting your subject at this location. This meter has one job, and that's to give you how much light is at the scene, regardless of skin tone, color, direction, any of it, how much light is hitting the scene. Okay.
Okay.
Your reflective meter that's built into your camera, or if it's a spot meter that has a very pinpoint reflective zone, it has one job, and it's to make everything 18% gray. And that's why you hear photographers say this meter is much more preferred, because it removes color bias and tonality bias out of the equation, where this one doesn't. So real quick, maybe this will help, and I'm sure someone else has struggled with this too, is got a black shirt, a gray shirt, and a white shirt. You can see detail in all of it. Mm-hmm. They're all in the same lighting conditions. So if I put an incident meter reading on this, they're all giving me, you can't see it on your screen, but all of those say F4, right? Because they're all under the same amount of light. They should all say F4, because it gives me how much light is striking or illuminating that scene. Okay. A reflective meter, sometimes called a luminance meter, how much light is emitting or reflecting off an object, it tries to give you 18% gray. So by pointing a reflective meter at gray in this middle square, guess what I get? Gray. It doesn't have to do anything. But if I point it at something that's predominantly dark or black, its job is to make it 18% gray. Well, black is not 18% gray, but it's doing its job because Canon or Nikon or Sony, whoever it was, programmed it to do this. And so now it's going to make your black gray, but that ends up overexposing. Same instance if it looks at white, it goes, oh, Chris, this isn't gray. Let me help you out there. Let me make your white shirt gray, and it moves it 2 stops. So in the exam, practically you need to know what, if you're using your in-camera meter, what it is metering off of. That's a practical application. You have to know what it's metering off of to make sure you're getting the proper exposure for the scene, because you don't want to make the bride's dress gray or the groom's tux gray. You want to keep them true tonality. So you have to understand that practically. For the exam, there will be questions saying using a reflective meter. For example, you were on a beach photographing a bride in a sunny day. Using a reflective meter, your exposure says it is at 1/25th at f/16. You should, and then it's going to list all these options. Knowing that a reflective meter will see something bright or white and try to make it gray, you should know that that question is telling you, oh, it's saying reflective meter on something bright or light. It's going to try to make it gray. So for the exam, understanding how that works will lead you to the correct answer, which should be 2 stops overexposed from what the meter is actually telling you, because it's trying to make this bright beach scene gray and not keep it true tonality, which is white or bright. And if you see a question that says using an incident meter at the subject location, you get the exposure reading of blank. Your answer is that's your exposure because the incident reads the light at that scene. Does that clarify some of that? Does that help?
Yes, it does. It definitely helped me understand a little bit more than what I was understanding. Yes, that helped a lot. Thank you.
So Sarah Creel brought up a good question, and it's more in general than asking a question about the exam or the image review. She says, does the CPP handbook have everything I need to know to shoot Sherman images? I got my CPP under the former image submission, but just ordered the Blick kit to shoot under the current image requirements, so I can better understand the process and serve our Indiana folks. So I pointed back to when we were in Michigan, we did our convention this past weekend, and I pointed my folks to the CPP handbook, and Guy clarified my answer. The CPP handbook that's on the PPA website, you can get to the CPP handbook without even being a PPA member. And there's a link to the handbook, and the handbook has links to almost every resource that PPA offers for the CPP. And it includes Chris's material, includes Steve Kozak's materials, Al Alderman's materials, practice tests, but it also includes all of the specifications and materials for the image submissions. So I hope that covers that part. Did you have anything to add to that, Chris?
No, I just want to clarify. She just wanted to understand the process to help students, or is she retaking the CPP?
She's not retaking the CPP,
Okay.
but we are, as liaisons, encouraged to understand the current process for shooting the images. So if you've taken or if you've done the image submission under the previous manner, or like I did mine through the strobe functions. We're also encouraged to know how to do the available light and the constant
Yeah.
light.
Yeah.
So given that we are allowed as liaisons to resubmit our images and without risk of having our CPP taken away, and just to see that if our images would pass. And so I believe that's what she's going to do,
Okay.
is submit her images.
Okay.
That's correct. I just wanted to, if I'm trying to help other folks, I want to go through the motions myself to make sure that I can do it.
Yes. I will tell you what, when this first came out, I don't know if y'all were CPPs at the time, and man, did it hit the fan. I mean, there was, change is rough on everybody sometimes, but this was it exploded. And not to go down that rabbit hole, but I think you will find, I would be surprised if you didn't find how difficult these Sherman images are and how much knowledge and technical skill and proficiency and competency it takes to pull them off. So I think it's great that you are trying to do this, because I think it'll empathize with your students that are maybe struggling with it. And it's also helpful to let them know kind of what to expect. Because it's not just, oh, this will be easy, I'll set them down and I'll do this. I mean, they ask for some pretty specific things. So, yeah, I think that's great that you're trying to do that and help.
I just wanted to make sure that the criteria was readily available and I didn't have to go in and try to declare candidacy in order to get access to what the requirements are on the images. So
I think once you log into your PPA profile, you should be able to go to the EDU, and even if you already have your candidacy, still be able to watch some of Jamie's reference videos on that.
Okay, cool.
So,
thanks.
and if not, I would just reach out to Julia and she could probably give you access. So that's a great, and I'll just say, Julia is a great resource for any of you. You liaisons know that, but any candidates, don't think you can't go to Julia Boyd, who's the director of certification at PPA, or her assistant Odessa. They're there to help candidates. So it's CPP mailbox at ppa.com. I mean, whether it's a question on on the protocols of declaring or taking the exam or using ProctorU or ordering your materials from Blick, any of that, or to connect with someone in your area. Maybe you don't have a liaison that's close, they can help you connect. So I guarantee you are not upsetting them or bugging them if you reach out to them. They want to help you. So
I'm going to ask Jeannie to unmute and clarify her question. She says, can you talk about the zone system and HDR? And that's kind of a wide range topic. So I'm going to ask her to clarify her question.
Okay, well, it was again one of the flashcards, and I always wanted to learn the zone system, but I came into this, I guess, after the zone system was so popular, and I don't think it's used as much anymore now. And one of the questions on the flashcards is, instead of the zone system now, what is used? And the answer was HDR. And that was, to me, confusing, because does that sound right to you? The answer was HDR.
Can you tell me when these flashcards were published?
Well, they're on the site. I'm not sure. You can go.
Are these the flashcards from Quizlet?
Yes.
Okay. Again, Quizlet is like a Wikipedia. It is anybody can kind of create stuff up there. And so I'm not saying they're not a good resource. There's good information on there, but not every bit of information on there has probably been verified. So just use those things with caution and back it up. Try to find proof for that answer somewhere else. There's probably some good information in Quizlet. There's probably some, just like Wikipedia, a lot of Wikipedia is probably accurate and some of it is just, not. So you just have to caution when you're using those. But to get to your question, the zone system Ansel Adams developed to show really for him making a print so he could determine different values of black, gray, and white.
Mhm,
There's 11 zones from 0 through 10,
mhm.
5 being your 18% or middle gray. 2 was around black that would print with detail. And I believe 8 is white that would print with detail. And the other one, which I don't understand why you need 9 and 10 if white has detail, the other ones are just white or white, white. So that translates a little different in a digital technology than it did in a analog technology. Because if you have no detail in white, you have no information that was recorded. That's why your camera blinks at you. If you have that turned on your LCD monitor, it just blinks because it says there's no 1, there's no 0, there's nothing. So how do you want me to process this information? That's why it blinks. And so that's the zone system was really the dynamic range of a printable image that Ansel Adams used. We translate that into more of this. To simplify the zone system, we have 5 stops of usable range. So each zone in the zone system wasn't necessarily a stop. But since for the exam and practically purposes, we're looking at full stops. So even that previous example I talked about, like your reflective meter is going to take white, it's going to overexpose it by 2 stops. Well, white in a printable digital media is 2 stops brighter than middle gray. Printable white is 2 stops brighter than medium gray. Printable black is 2 stops less than middle gray. So I don't know if this, so when you're looking at, so I don't know if this HDR really replaces the zone system. HDR is a method that can be used when your scene is outside of a 5-stop printable range, where the deepest shadow is 2.8 and the brightest highlight is F16. That's more than 5 stops apart, it won't print. That's where HDR may be used as a method to capture a scene that's outside of the printable dynamic range.
Okay, so on that, so a sensor in a camera they're all not made the same, right? I mean,
No.
yeah.
No.
So in like a Canon 5D Mark IV, for instance, what would be the range that the camera could see on the sensor? How many stops?
That I don't know, but I can tell you this. It doesn't matter. Because the print only will hold 5.
Okay.
So your job as a photographer practically is to take this scene that has darks and brights this far apart and bring them to here. So your camera can record all the detail and your paper can hold all the detail.
Okay. So the
If you can't,
printer can do 5, but the human eye can see a lot more, and the camera can
yes.
see more, less than the human eye, but more than the printer, right?
So having a camera that has a greater dynamic range, it helps you more if you're photographing in RAW, only if you're in RAW. If you're photographing in a RAW format, having more dynamic range in the camera is helpful because that gives you more information to work with. It gives you more ingredients to help build your image. So dynamic range in a camera, I guess, can be important, but that's not going to take place of having a scene that can't be printed. And I think that's where your question's kind of, when Chris is going, I'm a little confused because the zone system and HDR, while they kind of can overlap, they're really 2 different things. One is what can I physically contain and print, and the other is a method to make scenes be able to be contained and printed when they are not naturally occurring that way.
Okay, all right. So yeah, that helps me with that question. I get a lot more insight into that now. Thank you.
I think you just answered this question, Chris. But Steve Davis asked, what is dynamic range? So
Yeah,
we
dynamic-
kind of did a dive into it, but I think he wants to go
No,
deeper.
Chris, I didn't ask that. I pointed out there's a misspell and tried to help
Oh, okay.
help Chris out. So sorry.
Oh, right there.
That's okay. No, go ahead and talk about it. There you go. Oh, that's even better. Wait. I was just trying to help Chris Duncan out.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Okay.
Can we add something here a little bit to help you understand? One of the things is like, to me, the zone system is not dead. One of the things that I really studied a lot was when I go outside or I'm looking at something, understanding not to see it in color. And if I can, in my mind, not see it in color and I can understand it in tonal ranges, then before I shoot, I know where to shoot. And so for me, what really helped, because I'm very visual, there's a guy named Gavin Syme, it's SEIM, and he developed this program called Lumist. And with Lumist, anytime you take a picture, you can go in and see what the tonal ranges are. And so I started, every time I did a shoot, like I would come back and I would look at my images and I would put it in the program and it would tell me exactly what the tonal ranges were. And I started understanding the depth. And once I became better at understanding the depth, I became a better photographer because I was able to go out and see those tonal ranges before I shot, because it goes back to the camera can't capture it. And if we're asking it to pull so much, but it's not there, it can't be photographed. It's like if you go outside and it's a really bright day, but you're trying to photograph somebody here in front of you, either the sky's going to be blown out or you have to add light. So it's understanding all these variables that will make you a better photographer. So I would say that's probably one of the most important things you could study.
Yes. Surely there's more questions. Or spell checking, either one works.
That was a really good topic, Chris.
What is your dog's name, Chris? I know that's important.
What's that?
Your dog's name.
Ranger.
That's also something important in his family. Chris was just recently featured because he's the new TPPA president, and a really good article in the TPPA's The Photographer Online magazine even mentions the dog.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Well, you were talking about the merits of the program, and and making yourself a better photographer and teaching. When I was first looking into this, I obviously researching online, and I could not believe the number of haters there were on Petapixel against the new CPP program. Changing the imagery from your 30 whatever you needed to the 3, and this one woman wrote an article just trashing the whole thing, and the responses were all just hate. It was just basically hate against the PPA. That's what it was, and the president of PPA came out and actually responded to it, and it was quite a good response. If you have a chance to research that and look it up, it was quite an interesting, but it's not about. It's about making yourself. I did it to make myself a better person, a better photographer, not to go out there and go, I'm a hater, yada yada. So it really, you get out of it what you put into it, like Mia said.
Absolutely. And usually people that are on the outside don't understand what's going on the inside until they get on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
That happens with anything. So I will say, as a liaison or as a candidate, or even as a person that has passed the exam, you're right, it is to make you a better photographer, but I think that's also something that we should defend.
Absolutely. Oh, yes. Yeah, and it taught me where my weak points were too, and where I needed to make myself better. So,
Absolutely.
it gives you a place to plan from. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of you will find, if you are studying, I typically do a poll when I have students, and I ask, how long have you been a photographer? And I can't remember what all choices I give them. I don't know if it's even up here. It really doesn't matter. There it is. Less than a year, 1 to 3, 3. Most of them, almost every time I've been doing this, is between 3 and 5 and 5 and 10 when they get the CPP. Very seldom is it someone less than a year, and very seldom is it more than 10. It's usually in that 3 to 5 year mark. And the reason I bring this up is to encourage you that many of you that are probably studying now, you're going to know a lot of this stuff. You're just not going to necessarily know it in the way that it technically is known. Like kind of just to use Jeannie or as an example about HDR and zone system, right? Those words may get interchanged and stuff on the street, but that's not the technical definition of certain things. Dynamic range is being able to capture darkest blacks with detail and brightest whites with detail, and how much stops those are. That's your dynamic range, right? And so putting a lot of the terminology into it, I think probably one of the best things you can study is the glossary of the London and Upton book. Study that glossary, because so much of the exam is terminology. What does this mean? What does this word mean? What does this term mean? What does this process mean? Because they can't write a technical exam and show you images to try to determine it. So much of it is terminology. So definitely study that glossary. If you ever see a word you don't know, find the technical definition of it. That'll help you so much, and not only passing the exam, but understanding maybe some of your frustration. I'm like, oh, I've been doing this all along. I just never called it that.
I totally agree with you. And I took the CPP, passed the CPP 2 years ago. I've been in photography for 20 plus years at that point. And I joked at that point. It's like, at this point, I've forgotten more than I knew, because I took, a college level. I came out of college as a photographer, as a corporate photographer. And I knew what I knew then. And I learned a whole bunch of stuff badly from that point till now. And so I had to, studying the glossary, studying different techniques that I had learned poorly, and correcting myself was a challenge. And I think that's a lot of people that are actually taking the CPP may be in that same position.
Absolutely. So we get a few more minutes. I can entertain another question if we have one. Deb, did anything come to mind?
Call her out. She's from Michigan. I love it.
Looks like Rebecca's ready. Are you ready, Rebecca?
Sir, I would like some questions. I was supposed to take this test this morning, and PPA did not give ProctorU my information. So I have to wait now probably 3 more days. So I got time. I'm ready to do some work here.
Nice.
So you don't have any questions. You're actually wanting to get the exam. Is that what I heard?
I want to get to the exam, but until then, I would love some questions so that we can.
Well, I could pop a question on the screen, but the answer comes with it, unless I'm actually playing the slideshow. So that doesn't help.
All right, so I'll ask a question. I'll throw one out. I hear a lot of people talk about the color wheel. Why don't you go into a little detail about the color wheel?
Are you asking Rebecca or Chris?
Chris.
Smart.
This?
Yep.
Okay. This is obviously the color wheel will be part of the questions. I think the main thing to know about this is you have to know the order that the primary additives and primary subtractive colors are listed in. It's not good enough to know red, green, and blue are additive and cyan, magenta, and yellow are subtractive. You need to know how they line up in this star type formation. And I think Al always said real young girls can be mischievous was his little anagram. Is that the right? I don't know if that's the right word for that. To memorize the
seems like it.
order.
Yep.
Mnemonic.
Mnemonic. Yeah.
And you can start at green. If you want to come up with one and start at green, that's fine, as long as they go in order. Because you have to know that magenta is opposite green and cyan is opposite red and yellow is opposite blue. And that red is next to yellow, so the tertiary is orange. So the biggest part about this is understanding how they relate to each other more than anything. So
I have a question on this. On the online test for CPP, the one that they offer on their site, I'm sorry, for PPA, it said what additive color is created when you combine, and I can't remember, I want to say red and green. And it seems to me like yellow is not an additive color, it's a subtractive color. Am I doing my math wrong, or?
what additive color is created?
Yeah, that's why I was confused. I'm thinking, well, it would be yellow, I believe, but.
No, because an additive is adding white, which would make it either pink or teal, right?
No, you add red and green. Yellow.
I got the right answer. I answered the one that made sense to me rather than, I mean, but I'm just like, well, RGB are the additive colors. So I was trying to think of how I could.
Are you sure it didn't say what color is created when these two additive colors in equal amounts?
It might have, completely possible.
Okay. So all of the red, yellow, green, cyan, blue, magenta are all primary colors. So it may have said primary, what primary color is created.
Maybe so, you're right.
Yeah, so yeah, that, because the way you read it, the way you said it doesn't make sense to me, so.
Thank you. It didn't make sense to me either. I'm looking to see if I have it here, and I don't.
I think it was in the first 10 questions, because I think I ran across it this weekend too.
Yep. I think it's question number 1, actually. So.
Well, those don't always stay the same. It depends. They come from a bank and they are rotated.
Yes.
Oh, really? I didn't know they rotated.
I didn't either. I looked at it last week and that was the first question on the test.
Well, I think what Guy's trying to say is it's not necessarily that on the, maybe on the practice exam, they do that, right. But on the real exam.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's way more than 100 questions.
I actually found a question that was number 1 on there, and it said red is a combination of which of the following 2 subtractive colors of light. Was that it, Rebecca?
Nope.
Okay.
It said red and green make what additive color, but I could be completely wrong.
What additive light is produced when equal amounts of pure red and green lights are mixed?
That's it.
Okay.
Did I read it wrong, or is it just I'm thinking about it wrong?
I think you're thinking about it wrong.
All right, help me.
What additive color, right, is created?
What additive light is produced when equal amounts of pure red and green lights are mixed?
The yellow light would be produced, correct?
Yeah, I think that's what I think.
Yeah.
But that's not an additive light, is it?
It's a subtractive, correct?
It's a subtractive color.
Okay.
So are they using color and light interchangeably? And can they?
Hold on, I think I have a slide that will clarify this.
Sorry. And
First
hi,
of all,
everybody, I'm Marietta.
First of all, if you've taken any type of art class, throw that color wheel out the window. Okay, throw that. What is it? Red, green, and yellow is the art class one. Throw that, dump it, right? So additive, the reason and find the slide again. Holy smoke, I've got a long program. Additive lights are used at capture. So in equal amounts of these 3 lights, you produce white light. If you've ever been to a stage production, you've seen this. You see the gels up on those big racks with lights, and they only have 3 colors of gels, red, green, and blue. If they want white light on the stage, they turn them all on in equal amounts and they get white. If they want to produce a different color, right, these, how they interact here in the slide shows you that color that they produce. Okay, so Marietta, your question is true. Yes, they are using light because that's what we as photographers use in our 3 channels that light is broken up into when it comes from the scene into our lens, and how the Bayer array interprets it and all of that into the photo sites and all of that jazz. It's using the color of light in different quantities to recreate the colors we see. Then they have to take that color and put it on white, which is paper, and then use the subtractive process to print. So yes, they did create 2. So if you mix red and green, which they don't intersect really on this diagram.
You have to take the blue out.
Right, that would be the color of light that would then be produced. So think of putting a green gel and a red gel on a light, and what color now hits the wall. So you're still getting that color. Does that make sense? That's what that question is asking.
Yeah, I just think maybe we were kind of getting confused with the terms color and light.
Yep. Yep. But if it's additive color, it is light.
Okay.
To me, it's almost a gels question because you could stack gels on your flash.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's one of those practical applications Chris was talking about. Your client says, I need green, but you don't have a green. But I got a red and a yellow.
Yeah.
Good to know. Thank
Good
you.
way to practice it too with the gels, because just throw it on your white background and see what it does, and it kind of strengthens that color wheel.
I'll actually use them on black more often because it seems to work better on black or dark colors.
I just want to say this slide right here is amazing.
Thank you.
And Chris, I believe you referred to them in some of your content. Well, I think that's where I saw about theater color, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question. Chris, I think I think I already have your guide and I have not started it yet. I think I had it for a while. And is this presentation that you have right here, guide? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Are you want me to check to see if you have it? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. I did a screenshot and I think I have it. I don't know what I have, but look like I have it. I'm not sure if I have the correct one.
Is this the one you put the virus in when you put it in the chat?
Oh. Am I freezing?
No.
No,
you're
fine.
Okay.
I'm multitasking.
After that question, I have one regarding the image submission.
We do have to watch the clock, by the way, folks. It's 12:09, but
yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Deb Davis. Is that how you would have?
Deborah.
Oh, you're actually looking her up? I'm impressed.
Yeah.
Do you want me to ask my question while you're looking that up?
Deborah Davis.
I guess that means no.
It's a get certified CPP preparation.
Are you Deb Marie at faithbycreationphotography.com? Is that you?
Yes.
You were enrolled in the free trial.
Okay.
And you've only done 1%. So I can call you out and show you which one you've done.
I just told you I didn't start it yet.
You have done, there says start here.
Yes.
And yeah, that's what you've done.
That's all I've done. So
Ah.
So now is this presentation?
So hold on, I want to get to your question. I'm going to get to your question, but while I'm there, shameless plug, I know you hate to do this, but any of you are interested in taking a course, maybe you aren't that far along in your CPP journey, I do have a full online course like I teach, and that's the wrong slide. I don't know why it's not on there. Like I teach at Imaging USA. It's self-paced through videos. There is a free preview. I think get you the first 2 lessons and a practice quiz and such like that. And that's what Deb is in. She's enrolled in that free preview. So if you're interested in doing that, again, no obligation. I do have that. PPPA has a curriculum as well. So anyway, now I'm going to the next question. I'm trying to find the slide that has the actual address on it.
While you're doing that, and before you go, Miss Marietta, if you don't mind, we're going to go to Marietta next, but Chris's course is one of those you'll definitely want to revisit. I've revisited some of the exact same content more than once. It's just my learning style. It's kind of like when you read a book, you highlight it and then you come right back to it, or you dog ear it and you come back to it. But really great content. I haven't gotten all the way through it myself just yet because I keep going back and saying, let me see that one more time. The pop quizzes, if you don't pass them, go back and take them again. That stuff like that. Intentionally get some of the pop quizzes wrong just to drive yourself crazy. But it's a lot of good mix of content and a different style than what you may have found on some of the other resources. Marietta, what is your question that we've been dying for?
So I'm sure it's probably listed on the site, but I haven't had a chance to go through. We've got a little group going in Connecticut, and there's like 6 of us taking the exam shortly. Rebecca's one of them, but she's taking hers through ProctorU. The rest of us are going to meet on March 22nd and take it. After that, I know we have to submit the images, and I know the next upcoming image submission deadline is like starting April 2nd to whatever it might be.
Usually 14 days.
Right.
16th. Yep.
So if we get back, say like they accept 2 and we have to redo 1, do we then have to wait until the next submission date to send that in? Okay. All right. I kind of thought that's what it was, but I just kind of wanted a clarification in case any of the other people asked me. So
same as the exam, you have to wait 30 days between each.
Okay.
And I'm going to give you a quick little way to remember the dates. PPA has not changed these in the past 3 or 4 years. It's the even number months, the first 2 weeks.
Okay.
Cool.
That's good. Good to know.
That is good.
First 2 weeks of the even numbered months, except for December. So February, the deadline was what, like the 12th? In April, it'll be that second Friday in April. Then it'll be the second Friday in June, and then it'll be the second Friday in August, right? Yeah, and then October.
Nice. That's
All
good
right.
to know.
And then
when
we
you
can,
when you submit them, get your glass of wine and a rocking chair and just wait.
Because that's where JR is right now.
And wait, and wait, and wait.
You may need several bottles.
I've gone through several, yes.
So
we could essentially start working on these images after we take the exam and then submit them, or is it going to be date stamped that we're like going ahead of ourselves?
Right. The one tip that I try to pass along to people that are getting ready to do their images outside of the image submission, if you want to look at the next image submission date past when you're submitting, make sure you're within a 90-day period. And here's why I say that. I had to submit my images a second time, or one of my images a second time, and it was for something I shot off the background. Well, I knew I had an image that would pass because it had all the same parameters, and I shot on the background with that image. So I didn't necessarily have to reshoot, but I had to make sure that that image was within 90 days of the submission date. So a little bit of pre-planning in there, you can get 2 submission dates from your images. And that's the only thing. The other thing is, and we're talking a little bit about resubmitting images. You only have to resubmit images that don't pass. So you don't have to redo the whole thing. If 2 of those images pass, they've passed for good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. That helps. I have the kit and everything already, and so we've been talking about it, and I'm like, okay, well, as soon as we take the test, maybe, I can start working on these images,
It's always good to practice, though.
True. Very true. Practice makes perfect.
It's a fun process. I can tell you that right now.
Perfect. Thank you.
So you can order the stuff before you pass the written?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, mine's been sitting here for like 6 months.
Mine for free too.
Or Deb, if you're real friendly with your liaison,
I think I am.
and you live pretty close to your liaison, he might have a kit that you can borrow for submissions.
Yeah, that's what we're doing here because I already bought the kits. So there's a couple of other people that don't have it. And I'm like, you know what, when I finish, I'm just going to pass it on to you.
I think it's a yes to all those questions. I am friendly with my liaison. I live close to my liaison.
Fantastic. Was there anything else? I know we're past our hour, which is fine. I don't mind helping anybody if they need some help.
We go into overtime almost every week. It's been great. And a lot of times the overtime discussion is better than the questions.
Yeah. So just on the screen, that is my learning community. Find Your Focus. It's learn.findyourfocus.org. Again, my course has a free preview if you want to just see if it works for you. If not, I know it's not for everybody. So
I had a question on your course. Is it just for the CPP or do you get additional knowledge as well?
Oh, good question, Mia. It goes back to, so let me just find an example. I try to teach very practical information. So a lot of it, I mentioned that competent stuff, right, before. So I'm just trying to find a slide. So here's one, cameras, lenses, and attachments. So this will give you all the terminology you need to know about wide angle and what they do and blah, blah, blah. But practically, I'll show you how you can adapt them to your work, right? So I think there is some practical information in there, like here a wide angle was used in a practical application to make this drink bring it closer to the customer's mouth to hopefully sell it for my client. That's a practical application of why I implemented a wide angle lens. Does that make sense? So I think there is some of that. I think there is some of that extra stuff in there. And Guy he's been going through it just as a reference too. So.
Yeah, that's what a good example of what I was talking about a little bit different way of learning. You see it repeated in the slides over there on the left-hand side. Here's content that's relevant to the exam. How would I use that? How would I use this? Oh, that's why I want to know X.
So on my slides, if it says practical application has a little box, that means I'm taking you away from exam content and showing you how to use exam content in a real life situation. And then we go back to exam content.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So I have quite a bit of those in there. So like here's one that's practical application after we talked about hyperfocal. Well, there's a practical use of where I use the hyperfocal equation.
And yes, hyperfocal is on the exam.
Yes.
Rebecca's got her hand up.
Thank you.
Yes.
You have to say the question out loud.
I'm trying. Where did to get this shot, you had to focus in front of the crowd in order to capture the entire crowd, correct?
No.
Okay, help me.
Okay.
I still don't get hyperfocal distance, and that was the very first question I think I asked this group.
Well, you're very laid back. You won't be hyper at all.
I'm gonna play this. Hopefully you can see. What do y'all see on the screen?
The full screen, sir.
Full screen.
Okay. So typically we focus where our subject is. Okay. And so you really need to use a hyperfocal calculator to figure this out because lenses don't have it anymore like they used to. There's probably a few people in this call that remember those lenses that had more numbers on it than Amazon, but that's what it was for. So in this example, we're focusing at 10 feet. And you can see on the right this calculator, which unfortunately they did not handle the latest iOS update, so it's no longer valid, but there's calculators that do the same. So it's telling me using a 35mm lens at f/16, my subject at 10 feet, my near limit of acceptable sharpness is 5 feet 8 inches. My far limit is 41 feet 1 inch. So that gives me a lot of depth of field, right? But if I need to focus where infinity is reasonable sharp, that's a long way past 41 feet, then my hyperfocal is 13 feet 3 inches. You see that in the calculator, correct?
And you're focusing like 2 or 3 rows into the crowd in order to get the hyperfocal to work.
So yeah, so now if I set my focus distance at 13 feet 3 inches, actually past my subject, not in front of them, I have extended my depth of field. I lost a foot in front, or 11 inches in front from 5'8" to 6'7". So I lost that, that's 13 inches. I lost 13 inches in front, but I gained so much in the back, infinity. So hyperfocal is actually focusing past your subject. So in this example, I don't know if y'all, can y'all see my cursor or not?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So I'm probably focused right there.
The lady with glasses.
Yes. There's a lot of lady with glasses. Yeah, but it's
1, 2, 3. Looks like 4th row.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So 4th row out of 9, and yet everything was sharp from front to back.
Yes, and that's and this is another practical application. Is on this one. This is the one I actually started talking about it. This was for a university here in town. I photographed some material for them. This is their main student building, and it's a Christian university, so they have a scripture on it, which they need to trim some trees if you want to see it all. But it's important that that stayed sharp, right? That's an icon in this university's campus that had to stay in reasonable sharpness. If you zoom in on this image, this guy with the beard is not razor sharp, because I had to focus past them because this group is actually walking toward me. So I couldn't focus on that group because as they got closer and closer, the background got less and less in focus. So I had to set a hyperfocal distance and leave it and know that this group, as long as they were in that range, they would be acceptably sharp. And when you see it like this, it all looks sharp because nothing is not sharp. Sharpness is only relative to something that isn't sharp. Brightness is only relative to something that's dark. And since all of this looks relatively sharp, it all appears sharp to our eye. But if I zoom in, there's lots of areas where it's softer than others. But your eye doesn't see it because relative to what's around it, it looks sharp. So hyperfocal is super critical in a job like this, if that makes sense.
Where were you likely to have focused?
Probably right on this bench.
Okay.
One of these planters.
Yep.
Or maybe the light pole.
That's what I was thinking.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Chris, you mentioned something about the app. Which app were you referring to?
I'm using Photo Pills now. This app.
It crashed this last update?
Yeah, this app was Photo Calc. It didn't work in OS 13 or 12.
Gotcha.
So
Do you use an Apple product or Android?
I use an iPhone. I think Photo Pills is both.
Yeah, I've got for Android, I have Hyperfocal Pro.
Okay.
And it works pretty well. They've kept it up to date.
Yeah. Yeah, I just switched to Photo Pills because it does everything. It has my time of day, has hyperfocal, has lots of tools in it.
It's really incredible. All right, it's 12:25. Any other questions for Chris and gang?
No, but I was going to say, you know, the knowledge of having to use all these different apps, or if you choose to use these apps, and the difference between understanding how the mathematics play in are kind of two different things, you know, because once you're there and you want it quicker, easier for you, faster when you're working with clients and you're on a schedule and a deadline and all of that, these apps are so handy. But again, as Chris was saying, you still have to kind of understand where you need to put your focal plane to get that signage in the back on that one image where they were all on the risers. you know, what's important to the client and all of that. You kind of got to already, okay, I see the scene and here's where I kind of want to be here in your head first. And then maybe you use those tools to double check yourself, you know, make sure you're in the right, you got it right.
Much like you'd use a meter rather than your camera.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And depth of field does come into play in your image submissions.
It does.
Just
Completely, just completely.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for giving us your time out of the day. You're totally awesome.
Thank you very much,
very
Chris.
much.
Happy to do it. Happy to do it. So
Awesome. It is, we are well into overtime, and actually I got a client that I need to call, so.
And it's his Zoom.
That's right. Well, actually, no, this one's Chuck's, so.
Oh, okay.
I could have bounced off, but I wanted to see all my CPP friends, so.
Thank you again for doing
Yeah.
this. This is awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't know what I'm gonna do after I pass. So
Thank you, Chris.
I'll be so lonely on Tuesdays now.
Now
Your
you're going to become a
responsibility is-
liaison.
I was going to say your responsibility is to become a liaison and be responsible for the next person.
You'll be-
Oh,
you'll
I will.
be more than welcome.
I will contemplate that actually.
Okay.
But I just want to know if I pass the damn. I just want to. I'm like, come on. This is like this week. Come on, just send me the email so I know if I have to do this again.
Well, if nothing else, what makes you feel any better, the pay for being a liaison is phenomenal.
I'm sure it is.
I've talked to my CPA about becoming a nonprofit.
A nonprofit. There you go. Nice, nice. It
We
is.
need more
Thank you very much again,
liaisons in
Chris.
my area.
Say hello to your better half and to your dog, and if you can talk to your daughter, say hello as well, and giggle.
I will. There you go.
All right.
Thank you,
All right.
guys.
Thank you very
Take
much,
care.
guys.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a good.